Welcome everybody to today's webinar hosted by ISES and presenting the IRENA Study Solar PV a Gender Perspective. Please hold the line and we will begin shortly. Welcome again everybody. We are going to get ready and start in a minute. Just hold the line while a few more attendees join. All right, everybody, I think we are good to go. Welcome. It's our first webinar for 2023 here at ISES, and we are very pleased to kick off the year with such an important and very timely topic. So welcome everybody. And my name is Arabella. I am the Congress's Communications and Outreach Officer here at the ISES HQ in Freiburg, Germany. And I will give you a short introduction into ISES and the work we do, as we have quite a few new participants joining us on the webinar today. So ISES, who are we? ISES, the International Solar Energy Society, is a non-profit UN accredited membership NGO, and we were founded in 1954. ISES represents a diverse membership of academics, researchers, energy practitioners, consultants, students, businesses, and advocates from countries all around the world. Our vision is 100% renewable energy for all, used efficiently and wisely. And ISES works together with like-minded organizations from countries all around the world to advance the renewable energy transformation. Here at ISES, we have quite a wide range of key activities to foster our mission. For example, we have biannual congresses all around the world. That's the ISES Solar World Congress, and one is coming up this year, and the Euro-Sun conferences, which we hold together with the IEA, and the next one is coming up next year. We also have two major publications covering scientific content. One is Solar Energy. It's a quite old journal by now, also started in the 50s, and it's one of the most well-known journals in solar energy research. And then in 2021, we added Solar Energy Advances, and we are very pleased to say that this is a fully open access publication. Obviously, we do webinars such as the one today, and we do one webinar per month. We have education initiatives, both online and both also offline when we do conferences. We have a solar energy museum that's virtual, and we have infographics on different solar topics to help reach a wider audience for our information. Now, before we actually get into the webinar, just a quick info on the Q&A session. So we will have the presentation on the IRENA report first, and then we will have Q&A. You as the audience, you can type in your questions and use the chat box for that. And then our moderator is going to present your questions to our speakers. So you can start sending the questions in at any time throughout the webinar. The only thing we ask is that you keep your questions short and precise. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for today. That's Christine Linz. And Christina has been with us here at ISES on the ISES Board of Directors for many years now. And all the way back in 2001, Christina served as the Secretary General of the European Renewable Energy Council in Brussels. From there, she moved on to the Executive Secretary at REN21. And in 2017, Christine co-founded GWNet, the Global Women's Network for the Energy Transition. And that network aims at empowering women in the sustainable energy sector. So Christine, thank you very much for joining us again. I hand over to you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Arabella, for this very nice introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, to this first ISES webinar of 2023. I'm very honored to be able to act as your moderator today, and I'm really excited to have this topic on women in solar PV, a gender perspective, as a subject here today. Because effectively, you know, I think many of us are aware that one of the key components of key success factors for energy transition all around the world is the availability of skilled people, and we have a situation at the moment that, according to IRENA, there are about 12.7 million people working in the renewables workforce globally. This number is supposed to increase to 42 million people by 2050. But when we know that the average share of women in renewable energy is only at 32%, it's very clear that we need to do more, and we need to make sure that really the sector attracts the best talents of both women and men. And that's why I'm really excited to moderate this session today. And I would like to present the speakers of that session before we then go into the presentation. First, I would like to introduce Aline Oliveira Aline Kirsten Vidal de Oliveira. She is Vice President of the Brazilian Association of Solar Energy, ABANS, and the Director of External Relations in Photovoltaic Collaborative to advance multi-climate performance and energy research. She's also co-founder of the Brazilian Network of Women in Solar Energy, and an organization with whom GWNet has been working, collaborating in the past. And I look forward to your comments and feedback on the study that our key presenter is gonna present today. And I would like to introduce Celia Garcia Baños. She's Program Officer at the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA, in its Knowledge Policy and Finance Center in Abu Dhabi. Celia is a chemical engineer, but is working at IRENA tirelessly, I can say, to produce up-to-date and authoritative renewable energy gender data, and on identifying best practice within the renewable energy sector to achieve an inclusive and global energy transition. And without any further ado, Celia, please, the floor is yours. We are excited to learn about this newly launched IRENA report on women in solar PV. There you go.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Christine, for the kind introduction and saying that we work tirelessly. And thank you as well, Arabella and ISES, for including IRENA to present and to let us be part of this, the first webinar in 2023. I hope my screen is being properly placed.
Yes, we can see it very well.
Perfect. Thank you so much for confirming. I want to start saying that from an analytical point of view, IRENA has been studying the status of women participating in the sector for a few years, since 2011, with the first Jobs and Renewable Energy report that it was produced, where it was aiming to analyze what was the status of jobs, and it had a dedicated chapter of the women's participation, especially in the energy access context. And then it followed by to be mainstreaming the gender perspective in the different annual reviews that this report had consecutively every year. Initially, it was more as a qualitative or anecdotal type of briefing within the reports, but at some point in 2019, IRENA launched the first report that became a flagship in the agency, focused on first the overall renewable energy, but dedicated to the women, to the gender perspective. And it's my pleasure today to be presenting some of the findings of the latest report. But just to give first, and Christine mentioned it very briefly before, to contextualize a bit, let me highlight what our latest report on renewable energy and jobs annual review 2022 mentions about not only the solar PV jobs, but in the overall sector. We can see that in 2021, jobs in renewable energy sector achieved to 12.7 million, with solar PV being the highest employer, with around 4.3 million jobs in 2021. And this is more than a third of the total workforce. And decentralized renewables, in particular solar technologies, are also creating a growing number of jobs, even when the statistics unfortunately cannot capture it properly and we don't have all the picture. It's important to say that they have a big role in this industry and in this sector. And IRENA projections through a macroeconomic model also estimate that the solar PV sector could even triple globally by 2030 along a pathway consistent with the Paris Climate Agreement, only on the solar PV sector. So why is then this is important to not only know what jobs, but also what type of jobs or what is the industry doing to keep employing more different profiles, etc. In an IRENA, we also have these analyses that are called Renewable Energy Benefits Leveraging Local Capacity. One of the series, one of the reports also focus on large-scale solar PV. And it estimates how many jobs in person days are being created from a project planning to the decommissioning of a facility. In this case, initially, the study was done for a 50 megawatt solar plant. But we're doing now an update because of course the sector has changed a little bit since the publication of that first report. But overall, we can see in the slide that most of these jobs are in operation and maintenance, procurement, manufacturing, installation, and grid connection, and that these the needs for the different capacities and the different trainings that and backgrounds that are required are a little bit of everything. We can see that you have STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, high-level qualifications also in non-STEM fields, which are such as lawyers, but also for people with lower formal skills, like for example in the construction field, that can be leveraged from different industries with minimal training. And some of these industries could be the decaying fossil fuel and traditional energy sectors, and some others from, again, different industries that may not be still doing well in any given country. In this sense, and as Christine also mentioned very briefly, we have been doing an overall analysis of what was the status of women in the renewable energy workforce, followed by a wind study, and now today the solar PV. I want to thank again GWNet because they supported the dissemination of the survey, and I think that helped a lot to come up with these numbers. And as you can see, while women we comprise around half of the population in the world, still the energy sector is lower than the representation of women in the energy sector is still in some cases even anecdotal. Oil and gas performs at the 22%, which is very similar to the wind sector, and all renewables combined is a little bit higher at the 32%, mostly given by some sectors like the solar PV that are better represented. As you can see in the slide, we estimate that the solar PV in our latest analysis, women are 40% of the solar PV workforce. But this 40%, even if it's higher than the rest of the energy technologies and energy industries, is still below the 45.9% that women represent in the economy-wide average. And it's also not equally or balanced in the different roles and the different situations that women play. In fact, as you can see in the slide, similarly to what happened in our overall renewable energy and our dedicated study to wind energy, most of women working in the sector are in administration. In this case, in solar PV administration positions, 58% of the total are filled by women, higher than in non-STEM technical positions, which are those like, for example, lawyers. It's required high-level education, but not in STEM, which women account for 38%. Other non-technical account for 35%. This includes marketing, sales, distribution, product assembly, or installation, for example, driven in part by the off-grid solar PV deployment that I was mentioning is quite critical in the solar PV industry. And unfortunately, women in STEM account for the lowest number at the 32% of the total. These figures are consistently in terms of the highest share in administration and the lowest share in STEM with the previous analysis in the overall renewable energy and the wind industry. It's also part of our analysis. We try to see what is the status of women in managerial positions, because gender inequality is most evident at decision-making levels. In fact, it's well reported that across the economy, in policy making and governance, women's presence on company boards or senior management position is unfortunately painfully small. The absence of female role models is even more acute in the energy-related fields. As we can see in the slide, oil and gas perform very poorly, with not even accounting for 13% of all management and senior management positions. Wind energy perform a little bit better, with senior management being also smaller, and management being again at the 13%, and solar PV seems to be faring better according to our analysis, with management positions being around 30% and senior management again falling up to 17%. This is again below not only the average of women participating in each of the sectors, but also the average of women participating in senior and in managerial positions in the economy-wide average that is estimated at 31%. This is again something to take into consideration for later on speaking about solutions and measures. When speaking about the women's share by region and role, our analysis showed that women's share of solar PV employment is smaller in Europe and North America and in Latin America than in the Caribbean, compared to Asia Pacific and Africa regions, but the differences are not significant. The spread between women sharing administration and in all other roles is most pronounced in companies in the Asia Pacific region. The heavy representation of women in administration explains why the region fares better in comparison to women's overall participation in the solar PV workforce. When speaking about women's share by activity, we can see that manufacturing appears to be employing the greatest proportion of women at 47%. Other activities, which includes consultancy companies, think tanks, academic and research institutions, education and training centers, financial institutions, governmental agencies, and marketing companies, follows with 40%. But unfortunately, those numbers keeps on decreasing when speaking about service providers, developers, and installers, with the lowest proportion only standing at 12%. This is then suggesting that women have a harder time to become in any of these activities. And therefore, it's important for us not to only know what is the status of women, how many women and which positions are taken, but also what are the barriers for them to entry, remain in the workforce, and to progress. Women face challenges in the workplace simply because of our gender. These challenges are often quite subtle and very much linked to each other. Understanding what are these barriers is the first step, and acknowledging these barriers as well is very important. Regarding barriers to entries, our respondents highlighted that the two of the major barriers identified are the perception of gender roles and the social cultural roles. This is very much in line with previous surveys. But also in this case, limited mobility was highlighted, and the hiring practices in a very important barrier. The limited mobility is important to mention, that was not mentioned before. This could reflect that COVID-19 lockdowns had a stronger effect in respondents' minds, given that the survey took place after the COVID-19 lockdown, or maybe also can reflect the fact that many of the respondents work in manufacturing, where most of the opportunities are in cities and may require the willingness to move or commute longer distances to work. As in the IRENA wind energy survey, the relevance of barriers to retaining women in the solar workforce was much higher than those related to job entry and career advancement. Some of these barriers were flagged, starting by fairness and transparency in internal policies and processes, and closely followed by several of the other barriers, including lack of maternity and paternity leave, a common barrier for women to remain in the workforce. This result confirms the previous findings that focusing on investing in the retention of female employees could be an effective strategy to improve the gender balance in the sector. Not only the average, but also in higher senior management positions. Finally, despite performing better in decision-making positions compared to our previous analysis, as mentioned in the percentages that we shared before, when asking barriers to advancement, respondents highlighted again the social and cultural norms as the most relevant challenge, followed by mobility requirements again. Lack of childcare and the absence of gender targets and workplace flexibility were the next most often cited barriers. An interesting and perhaps surprising outcome from the survey analysis was that the perception of the glass ceiling was much lower in IRENA's than in this solar PV survey than in the previous sectors analyzed, which may reflect the larger number of women in managerial positions. Regarding gender pay gap is a multifaceted problem. There is women's greater concentration in lower paying jobs, either because they hold specific low wage jobs or because they work in industries that generally pay less, compared to especially those that are male dominated. But also women unfortunately face a conscious and unconscious bias that can result in pay discrimination, which happens when women are not paid the same as men for identical or equivalent jobs. So to assess the perception of pay equity and equality among our respondents, we ask how they perceive hourly wages for female employees compared with male employees, both in the overall economy and in the solar PV industry, based on their own experience. As you can see in the slide, overall, 28% of the respondents believed that men were paid more for equivalent work, while 4% believed that the pay was higher for women. Individuals' perceptions of a pay gap in their current employer in solar PV were slightly higher than the perceptions of a pay gap in the workforce as a whole. At the global level, the share perceiving pay equity in solar PV was 68%, compared with 64% for the employment across the economy. Disaggregating the responses by gender, however, we can see that men perceive greater pay equity than women, with 76 believing equity exists in solar PV compared with 41% of women sharing that perception. A similar difference was observed for pay equity in general, although again, perceptions of equity in solar PV seems to be higher than in the employment in general. To explore why gender pay gaps occur, we also ask our respondents that what could be the reasons that may create this pay gap, to again differentiate between what is an unconscious and conscious bias and what it is based on the different capacities or different positions that women and men are filling in the sector. And it's interesting to see how those who believe men are paid more, the reasons are due to reasons that can hide result in discriminatory practices, such as the lack of common pay scale or company policies, or differences in negotiating skills. While those who believe women are paid more are only due to the fact that duties and responsibilities are higher. So, of course, the pay needs to be also reflecting if, in a different manner. Therefore, to minimize the barriers or to eliminate the barriers, we propose some measures to engender the energy transition. We separate them in, as you can see in the slide, to first understand the complexity of issues of issues that women face by raising gender awareness. This gender awareness can happen, again, not only in solar PV companies, but also in the overall industry and the overall energy sector as well. Companies can increase the general sensitivity, understanding and acknowledging the challenges that women face, while promoting the idea that the sector presents a lot of opportunity for women. We also can suggest improving national policies and removing restrictive laws. Discriminating and inequality can be addressed by mainstreaming gender equality and women's empowerment across all policies and programs, including education, labor and property laws. This protects women's rights and guarantees that women have equal job opportunities while receiving the same wage as men for equivalent work. Ensuring that all parents are entitled to parental leave. Paternity leave can help to the fight of cultural and social norms, promoting equitable sharing of responsibilities. And in addition, in the future, shaping fathers' decisions about how to devote their resources to childcare, household duties, and paid labor in later years. Solar PV is a sector with unique conditions to empower women's entrepreneurship, especially in the decentralized context. So countries need to increase the investment in this type of activities, so especially for women, so they can become financially independent while boosting efforts to bring clean energy to all. Other measures that we suggest are mostly dedicated for organizations through establishing better workplace practices, policies and regulations that can be adopted on top of national laws. For example, gathering more gender segregated data within the organizations, increasing the transparency, particularly related to hiring practices, like for example, including salaries on job advertisements or the range of salary. That could also help to avoid any differences when negotiating the salaries, promotions and equal pay to address the pay gap difference. Offering parental leave beyond the national law that can also support women, especially again for in the years that women abandon instead of remaining in the workforce, and facilitating flexible arrangements, including hybrid work, telecommuting, remote work, condensed work weeks, flexi time, part-time, shift work, job sharing, etc. This is not only going to benefit women, also men, but can have a good effect. And last but not least, forming networks and systems to support training and mentorship. Networks, I'm sure Christine can bring more insights in the discussion later, but provide an excellent platform for career development and success. They facilitate greater visibility for women, offering mentoring opportunities and professional connections, and even providing career opportunities, starting by internships, for example. They can also allow women to become role models, which can change the perception of other women from themselves and increase awareness of the multiple opportunities available to them. Some examples, again, GWNet, I think we also can mention MESOL in particular for solar PV in Brazil, etc. And beyond networks, still training and education can also help to level the playing field between women and men. Dedicated training programs can provide women with the skills and knowledge that they need or we need to become competitive. This doesn't need to be only technical, but also other type of soft skills, including negotiating skills, etc., can help to level the playing field. And last but not least, and in summary, improving women's representation in solar PV same as in many other sectors, can help attain multiple SDGs, but also needs to be part of a broader objective, diversifying the workforce as a whole. This includes then everyone's visions, talents, and skills, meaning that we are talking now about women, but from IRENA and my personal perspective, I think we also need to open that discussion to include all disadvantaged and minority groups. Just to finalize, mention that we have the reports all available at irena.org/publications, and that of course we also have emails. I include myself in case anybody wants to reach out or to present any questions beyond the discussion today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Celia, for so eloquently taking us through the report. And I think its data on these issues are really absolutely key, because we have a situation, and I recall having worked with you and your team on the first Renewable Energy Gender Perspective report. You know, back then there was no data available, and now everybody quotes this 32%. And yes, they might not be perfect. They are based on a global survey that we did, but there's the best information out there. But and it is important to have this data, because then you can, on the one hand, keep policymakers accountable, but you can also really quantify the issue and just show the needs for this. And so I think IRENA is really doing a fantastic job. They're reporting on renewable energy jobs in the sector. They have worked a lot on the jobs along the value chain, and by now bringing also these gender aspects into the discussion, this is really very valuable as information, because I remember a couple of years ago nobody had a clue about where it stands. And yes, of course, you know, there's always the need for more disaggregated information, and then you know, break it down. The situation we've seen is similar but not the same on all the different regions, etc., etc. And I think also what the report really nicely points out is basically this issue that yes, it is about changing the system. So we need system change. We need to make the framework more inclusive, and it's also empowering the women themselves. And one will not work without the other. So we really need both those factors. And yeah, really congratulations. It's really another great report there. I will immediately now give the floor to Aline and sharing her, maybe you can share with us your observations, you know, from a Brazilian, from a Latin American perspective, what these numbers that Celia presented trigger in you.
Thank you very much, Christine, and thank you very much, Celia. As some of you know, our network in Brazil was founded right after a webinar like this for launching the first gender perspective report. So yeah, definitely this kind of data is extremely important. And our first reaction to watching this webinar was to think on how was the Brazilian sector on the same situation, how was the gender perspective here. And we decided that we had to do the same report, the same study here, and evaluate how it was the situation in Brazil, because we had our own perspectives. We used to work, I'm a researcher, and I used to work on the field, seeing every day the workforce and seeing that it was not represented there. I was there, I had my colleagues, but I couldn't see more women there. And we saw that it was extremely important to understand the situation. So we did first a brief research at the time, but then we could, with some funding, do a broader report on that. So we published that on 2021. And we saw some similar data that from this one that Celia presented, but there are some data that are kind of a particularity of Brazil. Brazil, you know, has like a high potential for solar energy, and the sector is growing really fast. I think the higher participation of women globally, but especially in Brazil, it's also because of the small scale systems and how you can like be an entrepreneur and start your own company and start working on the field. and small companies also reduced a little bit the glass ceiling, I think. But we have also like a third of our workforce is of women, but also a big situation in Brazil is the race. So I think most of the countries in the world that have the highest incidence of irradiation, the highest potential for solar energy, have the same similar problems. So in Brazil, most of the population are not white. Still, the workforce working on solar energy, 68% in our data are white. So black people, black women are not represented there. And also the workforce is concentrated in areas with not that much of solar potential as the best place in Brazil for solar. So we have here a problem, a big problem, and we have to fill this gap, but also an opportunity. We have like the poorest regions in the world are normally the regions with most potential for solar energy, and where we could like train people to get in the sector, and especially black women to get in the sector. And so we see like the challenges that Celia presented are the same that we saw in Brazil, but also there are many opportunities in the field, and we have like to from now on start working on these actions to improve the sector with diversity, so balance the gender gap, but also balance all the gaps that are evolving us for the last few years. So thank you again for the opportunity to be here to discuss. So it's really a big gift for me to be here, because this kind of webinar helped us so much, and I hope like to discuss more with you.
Thank you very much, Aline. Yes, indeed. I recall the very the beginnings of Mesol, and it's great, you know, to see your network growing and thriving. And yeah, Celia has pointed out the importance of networking. We are very much of the belief that it is important, you know, to find your structure. GWNet is really working and supporting regional and national women in energy networks from all around the world to learn from each other, to exchange among each other, because we believe that the challenges, and this is also something that we have found out in our in the course of our global work, the challenges that women face in this energy field, they are not the same, of course, but they are very similar from one country to another. And we often hear, oh, it's very comforting to see that this is not only happening to me in my country, but others have the same challenges, and then there is a possibility to exchange about these. So I would like to now turn to you, the audience. You know, please, if as we are quite many here on this webinar, it won't be able to unmute all your microphones, but I would kindly invite you to type your questions in the chat. And you know, any questions you have to Celia on the report, to Aline, or to myself, we are here to answer them and you know, make the most of it. It's, I think, a great panel here, so we can learn and exchange and inform each other. I have a question at the very start, maybe starting with Celia, whether you see a connection between the inclusive nature of renewable energy and more inclusion in general in the renewable sector than in the traditional energy sector. Is there some correlation that you see there?
I think there is indeed. And also the main difference, I think, is when the heat on the blooming sector has started. By the time the traditional energy sector started to grow, or it was a very well established, women had not been that well placed in the educational system. So there were not that many women engineers, there were not that many women in financing, in lawyer companies. So I think that is a natural shift. But I also think, so the multidisciplinary nature of renewable energy plays a role, but I also think it's a matter of timing. The renewable energy has been for a while, but let's say the bloom, and not only the education system also has evolved in that sense. I think before it was more of a generalist type of engineering. Even when I studied myself, I'm a chemical engineer, but it was under the industrial engineering school in Madrid. So, and chemical was just one of the specialties. But now we have more targeted programs that are going towards a more specific renewable energy, not only engineering, but also in masters, etc. So I think that also has given it a good chance for women to know where to get in from an earlier stage and get the capacity and training on time to start in the workforce. Something interesting that I may have not mentioned during my slides is that lack of training and background was not that much highlighted as a barrier in solar PV and in wind as much as it was in the overall renewable energy. So I think this also, again, plays or has a meaning, no? It means that women themselves and men who are working in the industry and participating in our survey acknowledge that women are ready and have the capacity. So I think that has changed in the last years, and I want to think and I want to hope that more and more this will come, and not only by default, but also because it is very much needed, as I mentioned in the slides, and you also pointed out, Christine. The energy transition will require a lot of skilled workers, and there's going to be a lot of jobs, not only in the core of renewable energy or in solar PV, but also in relevant industries that cannot otherwise the energy transition happen. No, energy efficiency, grid flexibility. There's a lot of workers that will be included, and if we aim for a 100% renewable energy global world, those will at some level be also be renewable energy jobs. So in this sense, I want to think that more women will be not only in very high technical, in STEM, but also in higher and senior positions, because the experience will be there, so there will not be any excuse.
Thank you, Celia. I have also a question to you, because when you actually compare the figures between solar PV and wind, you see quite a difference, and it looks like there's more women in the solar PV sector compared to the wind sector. I have my own, you know, I can imagine why it is like this, but I would like to hear from you whether you see any evidence, any scientific evidence from the data that you have collected on this.
So I think, again, it plays there's many reasons behind that, but I think it's also important to highlight how in this solar PV survey, there's a high influence of manufacturing employees from especially Asia, which we could see as well that the results were mostly driven by the Asia participation, which makes sense given that, for example, solar PV manufacturing is mostly in China. So, and there's a bunch of countries now creating like a hub of manufacturing companies, but in the same region. So I think this plays a big role, given, again, that is one of the main drivers. But also, I think solar PV with the off-grid or decentralized solutions, as Aline was mentioning before, the numbers may be shifted towards a more balance, because a lot of women have started their own companies, their own boards, and they hire more women. So I think it's a little bit of everything in that sense.
Yeah, and so there's a question from Vinay saying that the report is based on large-scale solar installations, but I think that is not true, right? You have both, it looked at both centralized and decentralized, and this is the main reason why we have higher numbers in the solar PV, whereas the wind projects are of much bigger nature and more centralized, and you know, big is always very attractive for for the men, correct? Yeah.
Yeah, and in wind, let's not forget that it's onshore and offshore, and I think offshore has been mostly men. It's more men-driven in that sense. Same as oil and gas, offshore oil and gas. So I think that also plays a role. It's, but yes, you are right.
Perfect. There's a comment from Bipasha. I think she's been working with you on the initial report, also renewable energy gender perspective. Hi Celia, so happy to see this work continue. The findings about solar PV are very encouraging. I hope that in the future, IRENA can also prepare gender reports in sectors like geothermal, bioenergy, hydro, green hydrogen. Before I give you the floor for some of your updates, I just want to, of course, do the promo. We are currently at GWNet working on a report on gender perspective in the hydropower sector with the World Bank and the International Hydropower Association. That report is supposed to be launched in March. And I'm sure IRENA has lots of exciting other initiatives in the cards because clearly, as we said, we are at the starting point of shedding some light, and so it's important to do more. Any news you can share, Celia, with us on that?
Yes, hi Vipasha. Nice to virtually talk to you. Indeed, we are planning to launch a new survey to keep on progressing and to track and see the difference. Of course, a lot of things have happened since the first report. A pandemic has happened in between, so that may have played a role the same way that we have seen some highlights or some hints in the solar PV sector survey. So we want to do that. We want to now, with all the lessons learned after 3 surveys, I think we know better, and we will try to also increase our collection of data to be able to disaggregate. And the ideal goal could be to have so much data from that survey that we can differentiate between regions, countries, sectors, etc. I don't want to promise that, but it's our objective, and of course aim. Aim the moon or aim the stars, land in the moon, no? So that's a approach.
Thank you. No, it's great, all the work you're doing, and we're looking forward for more, of course. There's a question for you, Aline, here from Mariana Silva Barreto. She says, Aline, here in Brazil, we have communities like Mujeres da Energia Solar. Do you believe that it is effective to help to start our gender equality? Or is this just to have psychological support and show something on LinkedIn? Did you believe that here we have ESG walking in direction of gender equality, or are we confronted with a new kind of greenwashing where they say that they have women as leaders, but it's not really like that? I think something very specific. Maybe you want to explain a little bit what Mujeres da Energia Solar are for the audience. Aline?
Yeah, I don't know, like if they are, if Mariana is mentioned the same thing. Mujeres de la Energia Solar is women in solar energy. So our network is network of solar energy. It's Rede Mesol. I don't know if she's mentioned that, but recently I think like Mesol was founded in 2019, and since there another communities started rising, even in biogas. And also now there is a congress, not organized by us, with like independent people that started organizing a Women in Energy Congress. So a great initiative. I think we have like, I think the support that the network from Mesol created is really important, but we could get some connections, some international connections. We started with GWNet and JZ that help us push and publish a lot of things in Brazil, and that helped to publicize the issue in Brazil, and that created a lot of other actions. And also there were some small actions before us. I think visibility is really important. Like it's really common a woman to be questioned for a lot of things they say. So if you say there is sexism in the work environment and you don't have data, it gets really hard to confront people and do something about it. So dissemination is everything. Of course, there are people that will start using this as a greenwashing or a woman washing, I think, now. But I think there are also some different types of feminism, and everyone's fighting their own battles in different ways. And I think what we want is the presence of women everywhere, and we achieved a lot of things with a lot of these networks. And for example, there's a big fair in Brazil that is called, it's actually international, but in Brazil is Intersolar. And we held an event some years ago, and now this year again, to improve connections between women. And we could see in a couple of years the increase of women participation in this fair. And that's because of the increase of the sector, for sure, but also we believe that our actions helped to increase the participation. So yeah, maybe it's slow, maybe it's not how we wanted, maybe there is some greenwashing, woman washing, but the important thing is that we are trying to achieve our goal of filling this gap, and I think we are going towards and not backwards.
Thank you very much, Aline. And to add on what you said, there is last year, for the first time, the German government has organized a conference called Women Energize Women that took place at the Intersolar in Munich, back to back with the Intersolar. And it will, I mean, I can do a bit of a promotion. It will also happen again this year, I think on the 15th of June in Munich. There we really felt a little bit there's a disconnect, because there were 200 women in the room debating about these issues, and then I just made the reflection myself when I walked to the conference. You know, I just looked on the metro down, and I just saw all these gray and dark suits. So we clearly have a disconnect, and I think it's very important also for us to go out of the room and to talk to the general audience about these issues. And Ricardo Rütter mentioned that the publication, this should be promoted in more international PV events. We actually launched a report at the World PV conference in September this year, but I fully agree we have to make it to the main conference program in order not to, and it's great that you as a man point this out, because we are very much of the belief that making the energy decision, the energy transition more inclusive is not an issue only for women. It's an issue for both men and women, and so we need people like you who are convinced of the value of this topic, because unfortunately we also get sometimes some other arguments, and I spare you the details, where people think that this is absolutely not important. So yeah, really great. There is a question, Aline, from Natalia Weber. What are the actions that have already been done in the Brazilian PV sector to deal with the gender gap? Can you think of some concrete initiatives that you know of?
Yeah, so MESOL has been doing some actions, but also now, because of some of the results that we got from our research, there's an initiative called Interligadas, that now is from the German government, from GIZ in Brazil, acting on courses dedicated to technical in PV energy and also other energy, renewable energy sources, to train from girls to adults, women, into solar energy. And they are also trying to fill this gap of race equality, gender equality, but also place equality, because as I said, the most skilled people are in the parts where the solar resource is not that big. So it's important, like our northeast region or north region, where we have a high solar incidence, but not that many population, and it's the poorest part of our country. We have to have labor there. That's important, and they are trying to fill all these gaps. So it's a really important initiative that is already having some results. We saw this increase in the participation of a lot of events. You see that, like the separation, segregation, that happens a lot. But the thing that is happening in more and more events, they are seeing this importance to make more women to come, like creating spaces for women in order to like make they come. That's really important, because it's good for everyone. It's also good for a man that the sector grows. And so the participants of them all, and also these events, trying to increase women participation is really important.
I am on mute. To both Celia and yourself, Aline, what are the best examples for successful gender inclusion, both in national policies or in your daily work? Anything you can think of and share?
I'm gonna start
Celia,
with some...
you want to start? Yeah, to give Aline a break.
Yeah, with pleasure. I think at national level, as I was mentioning, it's very, very important to mainstream gender at the core of the energy policy itself. So there are some successful examples already in the world. One is Kenya, one is Fiji. They both started with proper gender mainstreaming within the policy per se, and I think we will soon see very, very good results. There are also countries doing very good at mainstreaming gender beyond renewable energy, beyond energy, but from the education point of view. So I think that is also critical, because those girls will be the women of the future, and they need to have a different self-perception, a different perception of the world, and they are the ones who are better placed to challenge the cultural and social norms. And then there's some other examples, for example, in pay gap, which I think is something that most of the countries are still lag behind. Iceland is a great example. It started with a revolution of women protesting in the streets, and then it became a national policy for all the sectors, all the organizations, all the companies. And I think it's a very, very good standard to take as a role model and an example for the rest of the world to learn from.
Thank you. Aline?
I can talk more about my country. So in Brazil, we have some research institutes that are already like research institute and also courses specific, trying to establish, like, to increase the participants that are women. So doing a lot of types of initiatives to do that in the selective process, or establishing quotas for that. My laboratory is one that really makes a lot of women to go forward and push leadership. And also, there are a lot of initiatives here that work on the high school level to try to increase participation of women in the most technical jobs afterwards. So I think these are the most that makes more immediate change, invest in qualification, because we saw that small scale PV has this advantage of, like, you can easily do some years of course and start working on it and making as an entrepreneur or of employee of a company.
Thank you. And in addition to what Celia has mentioned, I remember also that there was some work done in the ECOWAS regions or Western Africa to working on mainstreaming gender in energy access policies. So there is a very good manual there on how to do this that can be found on the web. And then I think the question on what we can do in our personal daily lives, I think everybody can do something. And there's, for example, I mean, I heard people saying that when they are invited on a panel and they are the only woman, they suggest another woman to be invited on the panel in order to make it more inclusive, or you know, promote younger female colleagues to bring them to events, to introduce them to people, to kind of provide a network. Of course, at GWNet, we do a lot of mentoring programs, and we rely, of course, on mentors that volunteer to dedicate their time to elevate the career of a younger woman in the energy field. This is very rewarding. I have been myself acting as a mentor in many of these programs, and it's not only that you give, but you also get a lot of back, because you can reflect your own career. You get new insights into how younger people see what their work reality is, how they see certain things. So it's definitely something that I can recommend. So I think a lot can be done, and it depends on each person's situation on what can be done. There's a question to Celia. Do you perhaps know of other national studies on gender, like the one Aline mentioned for Brazil? We often get the question, yes, this is these global data. I remember when the report was launched in 2018, then lots of people said yes, but where, you know, what about my country, my region? Anything that comes to mind, Celia, on that?
I wish I could mention all the countries' statistics. Unfortunately, not only I don't know all of them, I'll give some examples, but unfortunately they don't exist. So I think it's a good, here, as Christine, you were mentioning before, we keep on pushing the envelope and bringing the discourse, so more and more countries, more and more companies start gathering the data themselves. I can mention, especially in solar, in the US, the solar census. It's a study that is actually very, very solid. It has been done several years, and as Aline was mentioning, it's beyond women. They also speak about the different distribution in races, and it's good to see where this difference is in a big country like the United States. Another analysis that was recently launched, well, recently, maybe at the same time more or less than our report, it was in Australia. They have a global analysis, but they also have different results for the different technologies. I can mention that within the report in solar PV, we mentioned some of these statistics. There's data as well for India in solar installers. There's as well, like beyond IRENA's reports. So we try to not only mention what our respondents have done, but also what is it, if it is matching what the world is, or different countries, different initiatives are saying. Power for All, they have a lot of strong data on different countries. We also collaborate with them in our jobs reports, and they recently launched their own census on jobs in decentralized solutions with findings on women for Kenya, for Ethiopia, for I think it was I think the latest reports were in those two countries. Well, they have jobs numbers as well from India, from Uganda, and I think I'm forgetting another country. But there's more studies there. Again, unfortunately, there's nothing globally. In Latin America, beyond Mesol's report, AMES and Argentinian network as well, also launched with the Inter-American Development Bank a report speaking about the topic of women in renewable energy, giving some insights. If not, I don't remember having a figure, but having some qualitative aspects also mentioned. So there's more out there. Again, we try to mention as much as we can in the report, so anybody who reads the report can find more of this. And the same as in the first report and the wind sector, we mentioned as well some initiatives. In the Renewable Energy Gender Perspective report, we had a whole chapter on decentralized solution in the off-grid context, in the access context. So we gave some also different initiatives there. While the report is a little bit old now, the initiatives, most of them are still running. So I think it's still a good read for the audience.
Thank you, Celia. Yeah, and I can just add, I mean, we see that in the work with the national women in energy networks or the regional women in energy networks, they are often then also making an effort to make some surveys among their members and among the industry. So I recall that the Mexican Women in Energy Network has produced a report about the situation of women in the energy field in Mexico, and again, I mean, you know, it's important that we are putting together and promoting as much as we have. It's not always that structured, but we also have to bear in mind that we came from a perspective where a couple of years ago there were just no data available. So yeah, still quite some far to go.
In this sense, I also want to mention, Christine, sorry, that is what has been done, but more and more is going to be done soon, no? So, for example, GWNet with OSCE, you have also in the making a report, so that is also something to stay tuned for.
Exactly, absolutely, yeah. Thank you for reminding me. We are at the moment working on a baseline study for women and also employment opportunities for women in Central Asia. So yeah, and I think it's about putting the puzzle together of these many different elements. There is a question coming in on the gender pay gap issue, because if I understand correctly, Celia, your presentation, this was mainly about perception of people, how they see the pay gap, not about how really it is. Because of course, in many parts of the world, not in all parts of the world, I think in the US, it's very common that you ask somebody how much they make. In Europe, this would be a totally no-go question. So, and then Ineda Gongora asks on how we can get more valuable information regarding annual gender pay and scales into the renewable energy industry. Are there any suggestions of making this, more transparent? Is there anything you can think of?
Just to clarify, yes, we only ask our individual respondents to see how they perceived, and that's why we separated between what they perceive for their current job at the solar PV industry and what they perceive from the overall economy. And that's also why we ask. Pay gap is really, really challenging to measure, first of all. It's a really difficult exercise, even within an organization. HR should be doing this exercise, but it's something that it is, again, because of the different reasons behind this pay gap, it gets a challenge. So we need to differentiate between what is a, I'm going to say, fair pay gap, which is because of, again, different responsibilities, of course, should amount for different pay in or different salaries. But also we need to differentiate, and this is what we want to tackle, that those that are because of bias or unbiased, bias, conscious or unconscious, consciously reasons. So yes, everything in our survey is based on perception, and but even within that perception, we can see the difference in with what men perceive, what women perceive, which I think is also very telling when doing the analysis. But also, when asking both for the reasons behind, it is very clear that when they say, no, women are being paid more, it's because, well, they are managers, so of course they should be paid more than somebody who is in an entry position, regardless of the gender. So this is, while this does not happen when both respondents, men and female, perceive that men are being paid more. Sometimes it's because of, again, they do the same work, but unfortunately women didn't negotiate the salary properly. And what can we do, or what can we push our companies and our organizations, and hopefully what could countries do, is to make compulsory to put what would be the pay range in a job position, because in that sense you will know how, what is your negotiation bandwidth. Another thing, of course, as you mentioned, Christine, I think is not very typical in Europe. I think it's a taboo to ask, and even organizations try to make you not disclose this type of information. And I think we need to be more open.
You not reveal what you earn. Oh my goodness,
exactly.
Absolutely. No go.
It's like illegal, and it should be actually the opposite. I think it's something that we need to start being more upfront, being more inquiring this question, making it less of a taboo, if to see, not only because of that, because you will realize and you can push. And again, this is something that when Iceland started, they initially started as a smaller companies or different companies within the government, but eventually became in a law because of people start asking themselves, no, how much am I being paid? How much is my neighbor, my friend, my colleague? So that is something that I need to can also start from us. And again, also hopefully when we become or if we become role models or people in management positions, then we make also the change from inside. Hopefully, Christine, as you were mentioning, men are a very important parameter in this equation. I don't think we need to, or we cannot disregard. So hopefully more men are on board, and those who are already in that position can also push on our behalf to better estimating it.
I just want to complement. In Brazil, we could do a research on database from 2012 and 2019. There's a database of like companies in the sector there are some discrepancies, but we did this comparison by mean of salaries in the companies. And in the mean, the qualification of the women were higher, but the salaries were 31% smaller than the men's salary. So it was a collection. It was until 2019 that was 1 year like that the sector was growing a lot. So maybe now it's a little bit different, but 31% is a lot, especially because women have more qualification in general because of like we qualify a lot because we are always afraid to perform the same position that sometimes we are already qualified for.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for that addition. I would also like to read out the comment from Winnie from South Africa. She thanks for the information and the study and mentions that in South Africa, they have finalized a baseline study on gender diversity in the renewable energy utilities, a partnership between the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, the South African Wind and Solar PV Associations, and GIZ. And she confirms that the findings are almost the same as the ones globally. But I think it's also these webinars like these are also really important because we can share information about what's happening there. And Joy Ingrid dos Santos is mentioning that CICRI, the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, they are also working on gender mainstreaming and gender aspects. So they're also doing studies in this field, and this is great. I think we need more, much more. And there's somebody mentioning it would be great also to have something for solar thermal and a concentrated solar thermal. So yes, I think we all agree there more needs to be done. Yeah. There is another question on what any suggestions for effective actions for PV companies themselves to take a start in dealing with gender issues internally. Any ideas there, either Aline or Celia?
Not only an idea, but a hope. Sorry, Aline. I want to mention when we launched the wind energy report, Vestas released a note acknowledging that the number of women in wind energy was painfully low because, again, 21%. And they set up a target as a consequence and as a response to the low number. Vestas being one of the main employers in wind energy, I think that hopefully will be a win that we will see in the next years to increase that. And in the next renewable energy gender perspective report, we will see that increase. So I want to think that more solar companies will also acknowledge that even when we say it's 40%, most of these jobs are in administrative position and could start their own targets and their own implications, and the same with national policies. So that's, again, it's a wish, but has happened before. So
yeah, and I was thinking before Christine was saying some small things that we can do. So I thought of one thing that is really basic: bathrooms for technical jobs. We went a lot of power plants where the access to bathrooms were really bad. So there are a lot of small things to improve technical environments to increase the presence of women there that we don't think there are issues, but are really bad. Like, for example, bathrooms for women in some places. We have a tragic happening, and some years ago, a girl was, it's really tragic, was killed in a power plant of wind because she had to go to the bathroom. She had to like get a car, and she didn't know how to drive well. She had to have a car and get out of the power plant, and she had an accident on traffic inside the power plant and was dead just to go to the bathroom. Because on the power plant, normally there is no bathroom because men don't need them. So there are some small things that we mostly often don't think about and make really the difference. Also, the suits we have to wear are really uncomfortable for women. even bras are not suitable for working with electrical energy. So a lot of things are small and make a big difference. So that's why it's important also men to participate in these discussions.
Yeah, thank you for raising this. I can add maybe there is, I mean, we have been working with, for example, the wind industry. We have a program, Women in Wind, that we do together with the Global Wind Energy Council. And there we have come up together with the wind industry for guidelines for gender. We have come up with guidelines for gender-sensitive recruitment practices. Of course, it's important that you know, you use gender-neutral language. You really encourage application of both men and women, and then there are certain things that can be set so that this happens. I'm also aware of there is Solar Power Europe, so the European PV in industry body has set up a European Solar Diversity Champion Award. I was member of the jury for the last 2 years. I think it exists now since 2 years, and they award the best companies for their inclusive action on inclusivity and diversity. So there are lots of examples there that issues that companies have, initiatives that companies have taken to really, you know, also not only preach about this, but also practice what we actually what they preach here. There's a very practical question. Somebody asking, I want to know whether there is any online training you can advise for a woman how you want to be, who wants to become a project manager in solar energy. So any trainings you are I don't understand. I don't really. The name sounds African to me, but I can't, of course, say which country the person is from. So I don't know anything that comes to mind.
As I don't work in the field on the ground, I have to say that I'm not that aware of. I don't know how much program management, the general PM Prince certifications would differ compared to program management in solar PV, but I'll keep that in mind, and if I find anything, I'll make sure I'll include it in the next report. And again, feel free to also write me in email and we can exchange further communications on this.
I would recommend the mentoring program of GWNet. I participated on this and it's great. There are many other mentoring programs that teach management skills, but also you talk to a person that has already been through enough and a lot of things that can help you get through this and manage your way to higher positions. So I think that's internationally and you can access that.
Great, thank you. We always like to hear that when you enjoyed your participation in one of our programs. There's also an initiative I know which is called Solar Energy International. It's Women in Solar program, empowering women from all over the world through solar energy training, networking. So maybe, you know, there are different initiatives out there, but it's very difficult to answer that in general, because of course we don't exactly know where ADEM is actually located. I'm just browsing through these questions. How you can become a mentor in the program? Well, on the GWNet website, under activities, you find a tab which is called mentorship, where you find our long list of programs. And we also, if you scroll down a little bit, there is the call, anybody who wishes to support women in this field, they can sign up and fill in the mentor data sheet, and then can join that pool. That's always very welcome. And ADEM is from Togo in West Africa. So I would then also advise you to maybe contact ICRI, the ECOWAS Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. As I said, they have been working quite actively on gender, and I'm sure that they can also advise you on some trainings to find there in the sector. And then Winnie has a comment. In addition to enabling policies and guidelines, it's imperative to involve CEOs and executives to be part of implementing the gender diversity policies and strategies, so they can lead the transformation of their companies. Absolutely, I think we need not only enlightened politicians, but we also need enlightened company leaders. And yeah, this is absolutely clear and important. Yeah, I think we are mainly through the questions. Before I read this couple of you know, really uplifting comments that enjoyed our webinar, maybe a final remark from both Aline and you, Celia, before I then, you know, share these great feedbacks with you, and then give the floor to Arabella for concluding the webinar officially and telling us, you know, how to get access to recording, etc.
I can start. Thank you very much for the opportunity. It's always really important and really a pleasure to discuss these matters with other people from around the world that pass through the same things. I think sorority is always about us, like that you can share this experience, so it's always good. And if anyone in Brazil is interested in joining Regimasol, feel free to contact me. And also in Brazil, we can share some information about capacitation and how to get in the sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aline.
And same, thank you so much for the audience, Christine, Aline, for the organizers, ISES, Arabella. Thank you so much for including us. While in IRENA, either myself or my colleagues, we hold the pen and we write the report. The report is based on people like our audience, people like you who reply to our survey. So I want to appreciate the participation and the fight of the good fight together, and ask if not, is not much to ask that next surveys that we produce, please also complete it, disseminate, give it to your HR delegates, give it to your colleagues, so we can have better and more complete data points and data sets to keep on doing the research that we try to do. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Celia. This is a great additional idea of what you can do in order to make this sector more inclusive. If you can't answer it yourself, share it with the relevant people, because of course, you know, the data is as good as the input that we get. And while I think, you know, we are working hard and really trying to get everybody of relevance really there answer these surveys, it's never enough. So this is definitely a great way of how you can contribute also to make that sector, to provide the basis for making that sector more inclusive. Bipasha mentions, yes, and I fully agree, mixed research methods, meaning a combination of qualitative and quantitative research can produce a lot of nuanced depth and complexity in understanding the specific challenges women face in the traditional fossil fuel and renewable energy sectors. She has done this in several projects, and yes, this is definitely an important element. We have had a fantastic panel. Thank you very much to both Celia for your great presentation, a great report, and also to Aline for your insights and bringing all these aspects from Brazil. We receive comments here, for example, Colleen, as a female PV technician in the rural United States, I appreciate the research you have invested in gender perspectives in renewable energy fields. Ricardo mentioned excellent webinar, so much more to be done, engage more men in these efforts. Yes, great, especially, you know, if we have an ally there in Ricardo. Change might come sooner or later. Our job is to make it sooner. Thank you. There's Troy mentioning that it was a stimulating and really interesting discussion. Thanks to both of you. Ömer mentions it was a beautiful webinar, great discussion, very inspiring. Great presentation, Luz. Thanks for the long time invested in discussing and the question evidence. And I think the questions and this, and that's why I'm always very fond of these ISES webinars, because ISES always manages to pull together a really interesting crowd, and there's lots of debate, and by no means, you know, a report is a starting point for initiating discussion and debate and awareness, and we need you all to really carry forward the message and help to bring about change and spread it to your constituencies, included in your presentations whatsoever. So this is exactly what it's all about. Again, thank you to the two of you for being with us today, and a big thank you to the ISES headquarters team, especially Arabella, in bringing us all together today, in setting this all up. And I give back to you, Arabella, for the concluding remarks. Yeah, thank you again.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I think we really had a very great first webinar of 2023. I have to say, I feel as motivated as I always do when we have those Women in Solar webinars. So just a few final remarks before we all head our ways, and that is that, yes, we have a recording of the webinar available, as well as the presentation given by Celia. And both the recording as well as the presentation will be available on our ISES homepage just in a few days. For any ISES members on the call, you already have the unlimited access to all past ISES webinars as well as the presentations, and you can find that in your ISES members area. And then, because we always have a few questions on that as well, for ISES members, there is the additional benefit of receiving a certificate of attendance. So if you want to get that, you can reach out to public.relations@ises.org to receive your certificate. So from my side as well, thank you very, very much to Christine, Eileen, and Celia for joining us. We are planning the next webinars already. We welcome everybody's feedback. If you want to share some feedback with us, please contact us at public.relations@ises.org. We have a small survey coming your way, because we too do surveys, but it's just a small one. And it's mostly about how you like the webinar and what we can improve still. So yes, I think with that, we are good to close. Thank you to all, and talk to you on the next webinar. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Bye.